Thorny, as we venture into the R&R, two truths are consistent. We love our dear Montana State, and we love great beer. And you know who else feels the same? Jeremiah Johnson Brewing. Brewed in the heart of Montana in downtown Great Falls, Jeremiah Johnson takes Montana's finest ingredients to craft some of Montana's favorite beers. And now, Jeremiah Johnson's second tap room is open in downtown Coeur d'Alene. Their Citra IPA is probably one of my favorites. But we all know, Thorny, you're not the hop lover I am. You're more of a Mountain Man Scotch Ale.
Well, Foley, I'm certainly not a mountain man, but you are right. I do love their Mountain Man Scotch Ale. But come game day, you and I are both cracking their Golden Bobcat Pale Ale. So when you're looking for a quality craft beer brewed with Montana roots, a relaxing tap room, or just a six-pack to take to your favorite Bobcat tailgate, Jeremiah Johnson delivers. Make your next beer a Jeremiah Johnson, and as always, go Cats.
Thorny, this has been a beefy episode.
We've had longer.
Yeah, I'm not talking about just length. I'm just talking about like the meat of the subject. It's been big.
Not the length, it's the girth. Got to put an explicit tag on this episode.
Yeah, you got to leave that in. Welcome, everybody, to the R&R Catcast, a fan-based podcast focusing on Montana State athletics. We're two dudes named Ryan from the state of Washington talking about our dear Montana State. We hope you enjoy. Welcome back, Bobcat fans. Thanks for joining us. We are the Ryans of the R&R Catcast, the Montana State affiliate of the Big Sky Podcast Network. We are fortunate enough to have our sponsor, Jeremiah Johnson, brewing in the heart of Montana in downtown Great Falls with a second tap room over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Thorny, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Doing pretty good, man. I'm excited to finally get around to talking about this episode. I'm doing well. How about you?
It's a big episode, man. It's a really big episode.
Yep, I got 2 beers on tap. Just in case this goes a long time, there's a ton to cover. We're going to try and condense it, but you know how that goes with us. Anytime we say it's going to be short, it'll go long. So maybe if we say it's going to be a long episode, it'll be short.
Well, we're going to get right into it, and into the thickness that is Brent Vigen, the 33rd head coach hired by Montana State on Monday, I believe. It's been a week, but yeah. And we're gonna dive right into that here in a little bit. First, we're gonna talk about what beer we're drinking tonight, and then we have a lot. We have a lot on the plate today. We're gonna introduce just like the thoughts on the committee search, how Montana State went about their business there, and then we'll get right into Brent Vigen and his resume. We'll talk about how he fits up at Montana State, what kind of culture he's gonna bring, how long we expect him to be there, maybe some expectations for us. And we have a special treat. Before we hopped on tonight, we were able to catch Sam Herder. You guys know Sam Herder. He's an FCS expert from Hero. They're senior analyst over there for the FCS football. He was kind to give us about 10 minutes of his time and give us some thoughts. He's a NDSU guy, so he had previous interactions with Vigen and some thoughts on that I think would benefit our listeners. And it was good to hear from Sam, and he brought some perspectives that Ryan and I had we didn't have. And so it was good to talk to him. After that, we are going to get into some Golden Coolie stuff. Oh, before the Golden Coolie stuff, Ryan, I forgot we're going to talk about the staff at Montana State. So ton to get into.
Jam-packed show, as they say. But we're not any sort of time constraints, so we don't have to like get it out before the next commercial break or anything like that. So there's that.
No, and really, Ryan, too, like, I mean, we did the Jeff Choate episode, 2 weeks ago. It's been about 55 days of just turmoil and in Montana State right now, and it's been a ride for us fans, and that's the cool thing about this podcast is we're just going to give you our fan thoughts, how we feel about this, how it's affected us, and what we think going forward.
Yeah, we can pretty much say whatever we want to say. The raw emotions, like, we just kind of let it all out. I'm sure plenty of people listening to this have had similar conversations with their friends. Like, I hope that's what we kind of bring, is just a fan perspective, an average fan.
Right on. Well, let's get right into it. So, what are we drinking tonight? Thorny, you're on tap. What do you got?
So you got me in the mood for brown ales. You've had them
Nice.
at least one episode recently, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I was in Bellingham, and there is a place there called Elizabeth Station, which it's a giant beer place that has individual cans from basically all over the world. They have a really good selection, a really diverse selection. They have a whole selection like Germany, and the cans aren't even in English. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. But one thing that caught my eye is Samuel Smith's Nut Brown Ale, and that is from England, a Samuel Smith brewery in Tadcaster, England. It is a nut brown ale, and you know what? I haven't even opened it yet, so let me open it. I had been drinking my other beer, forgot to open this before I started talking about it. So there's my first little sip. Oh man, that's pretty good. That's pretty smooth. That is nice. This is like the oldest brewery in Tadcaster. Well, that can't mean very much, but anyway, established in 1758. Old brewery.
Huh. I think we've had that beer on before, like in our initial season.
That sounds familiar. Like actually, when I was looking at it, it's like Samuel Smith's. I don't know if I had this beer, but I had a Samuel Smith's. I mean, that does sound familiar.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right on, man. Well, good. I like a good nut brown ale. I'm glad you found one. I'm always on the hunt for nut browns. I don't know if nut brown ales have a season. It kind of feels more of a winter or a fall type beer, but yeah, they're one of my favorites. All right, Thorny. Hey, man, I have the privilege of drinking a Jeremiah Johnson brew tonight, the Citra IPA. I found it in Spokane. I'm super stoked. My wife found it. I called my wife. I say, hey, I was going, I wasn't near the place that has the beer. So I called my wife and I say, hey, would you go pick up a couple Jeremiah Johnsons? And you can kind of pick them up just by single cans there. So she got the Citra IPA, the blonde, and the Mountain Man. So tonight's the Citra IPA. I'm stoked to be drinking something from Great Falls, Montana. And of course, it's Jeremiah Johnson. They're our sponsors. So it's awesome. Put in my Golden Coolie. It's lovely. I love the Citra IPA.
Yeah, special episode calls for some special beer. That's for sure.
You know it, man.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Right.
I haven't found anywhere over here that has it, but as soon as I do, it's mine.
All right, Thorny, before we dive into Brent Vigen's resume, we have to talk about the search that Montana State put together because it was gaining a lot of traction on the social media. I mean, national attention. We had quite a few candidates, and it was something that went a little longer than you and I had expected. But Montana State pulled, I mean, to me, a very impressive search with quite a few committee members. What was your just like thoughts on how Montana State went about business there?
Well, I think before we get into that, I want to mention the search committee. The first thing I want to ask you about is the search committee. Did you think the search committee was too big? And what did you think about having the players on the search committee? And I'm going to go ahead and read the search committee out for anyone listening who may not have already known about this. We have Terry Leist, MSU Vice President, Administration and Finance. Cammie Bechtold, MSU Athletics. I'm not sure what she would be. Dan Davies, Casey Fox, George Haynes, Faculty Athletics Rep and University Athletics Committee. We have Dennis Erickson, MSU Bobcat legend and, obviously coaching legend, NFL legend. Rick Van Cleve of the Quarterback Club. Trisha Binford, head women's basketball coach. And then the student athletes made up of Troy Anderson, Amandre Williams, Lewis Kidd, Tucker Rovig, Chase Benson, Michael Jobman, and Taylor Tuiasosopo. So there we have our committee, pretty large committee, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 football players on the committee, basically representing various position groups. Although we have 2 linemen on there, 2 offensive linemen on there. So does that tell you anything right there, that we put 2 O-line on there?
Not necessarily. I see these guys as just the leaders within the program.
I agree with that, but it's interesting how much of a priority MSU puts on running the football, having a good offensive line, and then 2/7 of the committee was made up of offensive linemen.
Yeah. You asked me a question, and maybe was there too many people on the committee? And that I don't know, because I don't know how they structured their meetings and what kind of roles these people played. Uh, I don't have a good answer for that.
I don't either. Just a question I asked. Maybe there is no answer. I mean,
Yeah.
how would you possibly know right or wrong answer on that? I guess the fact that it took longer than you and I expected, which what our expectations don't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Just because we thought it would take 10 to 14 days. Why do we think that? Is that stupid of us to even think that? I don't know. But it's certainly, the more people you have, the more debate there's going to be, the more different opinions are going to be. Eventually, someone's going to make a decision. So maybe that led to the longer time frame. Maybe some guys were lobbying for certain guys, and who knows? But it seems like a lot. But I couldn't tell you if it's a good or bad thing. I think,
No.
as we're going to get into, I think we ended up with a guy that I'm super excited about. So I'm not upset with the committee. It must have worked out well enough.
Yeah. One thing I really did like, just like a parting thought on this, is just the amount of student athletes they had. I mean, we look at all those football players. I think Jeff Choate built a player-run program, and to have that many players on this committee was a strategic move by Leon.
It is. I mean, you could almost argue that it kept them engaged. They're captain type guys, so they kept their teammates engaged. Like, hey, I'm hearing this. Come on, guys, let's get around and chat about this new candidate we're talking about here. And it keeps everyone engaged. It keeps the whole team engaged, talking about MSU football, and not maybe, oh no, what are we going to do? Should we start looking in the transfer portal? And maybe that's part of the reason they did it. But obviously, they did it too because it's an important piece of it. You want to have your student athletes have a say in it, and I think that's kind of a democratic way to go about it. And I applaud MSU for kind of taking that approach.
Yeah, I mean, definitely shows that they value our student athletes. That's for sure.
All right. Any other final comments on the? Well, we're talking about the committee now. What did you think about just the actual search and how it transpired? Some guys allegedly were offered, turned down it, or withdrew their candidacy. I mean, do you think it was like a normal thing? Do you think it was kind of like were you worried at any point with like Matt Lubick being supposedly offered the job and then withdrawing his name and all these things? Was that ever a concern to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're fans, right, Ryan? So we have rooting interest in this, and it was all over for us. You and I were. I mean, I would wake up every morning, just put in context, and I would look at my phone and be like, I look to see if you had any information, or I would browse the Twitter to see if anything was updated from Coulter Nuanez and Skyline Sports, which, by the way, Coulter and Brooks and Skyline did a fantastic job through this whole search, and they really were the leading force on putting out information. So, I mean, a lot of people think you and I have connections with Montana State. We really don't. We're just, like we said, we're like two fans, just like you are, who are listening. And so we were getting the same information, if not less information than some of you out there, for sure.
It's true. Yeah, there's definitely more connected Bobcat fans than us.
Oh yeah.
We don't even live in Montana, so I mean, it's we don't have any sort of relationships. But yeah, I do want to give Coulter mad props here, because otherwise we wouldn't even have known any of this.
No.
And maybe that would have been better.
Yeah.
In some ways. Maybe if we didn't know he was hired or offered and he withdrew, and these are all the candidates, we get excited about candidates that were actually never even in serious consideration. I don't know. But I mean, we have to have the news. Someone's got to be doing it, and Coulter does as good as anybody. So just mad props to Coulter Nuanez, Skyline Sports, and Brooks.
Yeah, so a little final thought on that. There was definitely times during this search where I was like rooting for specific candidates. Like at one point, I was really hoping we would get Coach Mack back. When Wilson news came out, I kind of latched onto him. I don't know why, but it's more of a gut feeling. Vigen was a guy that we both looked at highly early on. And so it was just, like I said, it kind of felt like a roller coaster. And then you would hear rumblings here and there. And so it just felt all over. And then to the point where you and I, Ryan, I mean, you're going to agree on this. We both just kind of got burnt out on it. And it was just like, oh man, just tell me who we have at this point. Like, come on, let's just get on with this. And so it was kind of exhausting.
I couldn't stay away though. Like I'd get annoyed with it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't care. Stop saying like this guy's a candidate, then he withdraws. Like, I don't care. Just wake me up when we have a coach. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like refreshing Bobcat Nation to see what people are saying. So,
well, no, it was like a culmination of like a 50 some days of just like anxiety of Jeff Chilt leaving, and then that happened, and the coaching search, and I mean, so the feelers were all over. So
I think a lot of this is amplified
exhausting
by the fact that we haven't played a football game in a long time.
Oh my gosh!
So,
come on now.
This is all that everyone's already like frustrated by not getting to play any football, and then you add this onto it. It's just like just too much sometimes. So I'm glad it's over. Man. I'm glad that we have a coach. And if you and I feel this way, imagine how like Leon Costello feels, and all the guys on the committee and the ladies on the committee. Like how can everyone feel right now? They're probably
right.
Ooh. I posted a meme of Frodo from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And like all beat up after he throws the ring in the whatever. I don't remember the movie, but it's like, it is done. And the first person to like it was Leon Costello.
Yeah.
He probably just saw that and like, yeah, that's me right there. Just beat up. It's done. I'm beat up. It's over.
Yeah. Leon, if you're listening, I wanted to say thank you for all the service that you do for Montana State. We are really impressed with the work that you do, and hopefully we can talk to you someday. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Take a week vacation, man.
Yeah. For sure.
All right. So that is our thoughts on the committee and the process. Let's move into talking a little bit about the new coach. That's what we're here for. So Brent Vigen becomes a 33rd head coach in Montana State history, coming over from Wyoming, where he served as the offensive coordinator from 2017 to 2020. Actually, I guess he was the OC the entire time. He also just had some various other positions at various points. But from 2014 to 2020, he was the offensive coordinator under Craig Bull's staff, who he's been with Craig Bull since 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. He was on the North Dakota State staff basically from 1998 all the way up until that Craig Bull left for Wyoming and took Vigen with him. But before that, he was the offense coordinator North Dakota State from 2009 to 2013. Before that, he was the passing game coordinator 2004, running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends before that. So he's done everything. North Dakota State. He played football at North Dakota State. He is born in Buxton, North Dakota, population like 306, something like that. So
small town boy.
We're talking about a guy who's been coaching for 23 years and has been at 2 programs. That's pretty impressive. Like that kind of commitment, longevity, and loyalty is something that's hard to find. And that's certainly going to play into the discussion we have later about the longevity. But there it is. There is Brent Vigen's resume. And let's just talk real quick here on what we're talking about here. What did you think about his resume? Just looking at it on paper, without considering like what kind of culture he might bring, the fit he might have, just from strictly a resume. What do you think?
Well, if I'm looking at it through the fans' perspective, I mean, North Dakota State obviously stands out. And so that makes me happy because he's been around a championship culture. And so I guess that's the biggest takeaway when I look at this. Like he's been indoctrinated in the run that North Dakota State has had. And I'm happy to have him now. I mean, that's going to be, he's seen what it's taken to win at the FCS level. That's big time for me.
It's kind of funny too. His time at North Dakota State came to Bozeman twice. And he mentioned at his press conference that kind of left an impression on him about how Montana State was only a handful of programs in the country that kind of have what it takes, and that he would feel like leaving his position for to be a head coach at. And part of that is in 2010 when they came to the playoffs, and then the other one was 2005. I believe it was 2005. It was Mike Kramer, and they had just transitioned from Division II, and they were still like top 10. They're basically like a top 5 program immediately in the FCS, and they weren't even playoff eligible for like 2 years because of the rules, but they were still like the number 3 ranked team who wasn't playoff eligible. So, but we actually beat them in that game. It was like 20-17. It was a close fought game. I think with Lule, quarterback back then. Anyway, way tangent here. A guy who
Thorny, hold on. Was 2010? Was that the game when we lost it in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, that was a game where we were holding strong, like driving down to get back within a touchdown or maybe even tie the game. And I think we had a turnover, and then they just boat raced us. Like, they just ran for like 300 yards in that 1.5 quarters.
Yeah. It was maddening. I remember that game.
Seems like every time we play North Dakota State, they just run for 600 yards on us. So,
yeah.
So there you go. A guy who has been in a program that knows how to win FCS national championships. He was the offensive coordinator for 3 of those. He helped coach Carson Wentz, Easton Stick, and I'm not sure about Brock Jensen, but, all the stud quarterbacks that North Dakota State has had. So obviously his time at North Dakota State goes without saying, successful. Does his time at Wyoming concern you where his offenses were not super productive, and Wyoming not a very good football team in during his time there, or Craig Bull's time there? Just a kind of a meddling, oh my gosh, I can't think of the conference right now. Help me.
The Mountain West.
Mountain West. I was going to say Missouri Football Conference. The Mountain West Conference. Do you think his kind of mediocre success at Wyoming is concerning?
So if we would have talked about this last night, which we tried to, I would have been akin to say, yeah, probably. But I was thinking about this in the shower this morning, oddly enough. And I was reminded of our former coach, Jeff Choate. He would always say, this is about the players. And if it's about the players and you're at Wyoming, we know Wyoming doesn't get the top-notch players. So it makes me a little less concerned, because attracting a big-time athletes who are going to be difference makers, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, Wyoming is not going to be your first option. So, if you don't have the horses to do the job, you just don't have the horses.
Is it your responsibility, especially as an offensive coordinator, to adjust to the horses you do have?
Yeah, of course. And when you look through his stats, you're going to see the rushing is definitely more prolific than the passing in his time at Wyoming. What are your thoughts?
So,
I know you have some reservations.
Well, the more I've thought about it, the less I have. So let's say his style of football didn't work great at Wyoming, had varying degrees of success. Some years they were decent, some years they were pretty bad. He's going to have, in terms of the teams he's competing against, way higher level talent than he'll ever have had at Wyoming. He will have the horses to do what he wants to do. So he's at Wyoming, and you're not going to get the guys that are going to go out and win against the Boise States or the other, elite teams in the West and the Pac-12 even. And you're not going to get those guys. But if you're at Montana State, you're going to get the best guys that you can get at this division that are going to be able to go out and win the Big Sky Conference. And arguably he already has a lot of those on the team, because Montana State has a very good roster currently. So I just think the fact that he's going to be able to recruit higher talent to the relative level that he's at than he would ever have had the possibility to do at Wyoming. Yeah,
I think that's a great point.
So that makes me more optimistic. It does make, I have some reservations. I'm not going to say, man, he's just such an amazing coach at Wyoming that how do we even get him? It sounds like Wyoming fans are almost universally not too sad to see him go. But you also wonder how much of that is a product of being a assistant coach under Craig Bull, who's been running his style, his vision for almost 20 years.
Correct.
So we'll find out real quick. And so will Wyoming, if it was a Craig Bull offense or if it was a Brent Vigen offense at Wyoming. But even if it is his offense and people have worries about that, I still think he'll have more horses at this level than he would ever at Wyoming against, comparable competition.
Well, one thing Brent was talking about in his press conference is, he really stressed his admiration and cultivation underneath Craig Bull. So I imagine I would assume it's going to be largely the same.
Craig Bull teams are very tough. There's no doubting that. So I think this is probably a good time to transition into the next thing on our sheet here, which is, I'm actually looking at it for once. Are you looking at it?
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we don't we always have a good outline template put together, and then we just like ignore it largely and then go back to it and like, oh man, we didn't talk about that. But we're looking at it. Fit. There's a good time to transition into the fit. How well do you think Brent Vigen fits into the culture, into Bozeman as a Montanan? I mean, it seems like he checks all the boxes.
I don't know much about Brent Vigen. I mean, we have a little bit of a sample size just watching him speak, and he's certainly different than Jeff Choate. And I don't want to spend tonight talking about the juxtaposition of him and Jeff Choate, but that is something to note, right? Yeah, I mean, Jeff Choate's this charismatic figure, great orator, and Brent Vigen he commanded the room. I could tell he had a presence, specifically when I saw him address the players, which made me like super happy. But he didn't come across as that fiery individual that Jeff Choate is. So just maybe a cooler, calmer demeanor. And that's fine. He's going to be himself. How he fits in Montana, I think, coming from North Dakota, I think that's a big deal. Coming from a small town, he's going to be able to relate to a lot of Montana, especially when he goes on the recruiting trail.
He goes on the Eastern recruiting hit. All those towns are going to be bigger than the town he grew up in.
Yeah.
Like Plentywood's going to be bigger than Buxton.
That's huge, right? I think to be like to endear himself to Montana State culture, I think you just kind of have to be a salt of the earth kind of guy, tough, no nonsense, gonna run a high level program that is player run. I think Brent's gonna bring that, man. I mean, everything what I've been learning about him, I was a little hesitant at first. He didn't excite me. I mean, I'll be honest. It didn't excite me right away, but the more I'm starting to mine information, the more I'm starting to see, that this was a good fit. This is probably maybe the best fit. Ooh, I'll even say that. Maybe the best fit we could have had going forward.
Yeah, I remember like one of the first texts you sent me, like, you know what? This guy just does not excite me.
Yeah.
And obviously that was days ago. And well before press conferences, well before that little video that the Bobcat football Twitter account posted of him addressing the players. Like, this is just your initial impression. But part of that is, I think, because of how the search was played out. Because we had so many like high profile guys, and you started getting stars in your eyes a little bit for these kind of higher caliber guys. And, none of them were head coaches necessarily either. But like Matt Lubick, I mean, that guy's big time in the coaching profession, the P5. And then you got like the Ken Wilson guy came on strong, and he seemed really attractive at the time. And it's like, it almost just feel like you just all of a sudden like, oh, well, this guy's been on the radar the whole time and we're going with him. Like, oh, okay. But so, I mean, that doesn't really mean anything. So it's easy to be disappointed only because of how the search played out. But in all honesty, he probably may have been the best candidate from the moment he came on the radar.
For me, the reason why he didn't feel like the best candidate, or maybe why I felt lackluster about him, was simply because the drug that is Jeff Choate for me. I love me some Jeff Choate, and he's not Jeff Choate. And like I have, and still am working through that. It's just kind of like a breakup, like we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, that's the only concern I have from Jeff Choate's legacy is that, he really did make it a player-run program, and he tried to make things about Montana State, but at the same time, it was about him in some ways. Mm-hmm. There just had to be an air of like, I don't want to say like demagoguery, but a little bit about me. And now that he's not here, how is it? Is it about the program, or how much was it about Jeff Choate? I guess we'll probably find out relatively soon. But I think the program. I think Jeff Choate did a good job making about the program, about Montana State, about the name on the front of the jersey. So I think a guy like Vigen can come in and sustain that and fit right in.
Absolutely. So let's move into the kind of like culture, Ryan. Like what kind of culture do you think he's going to want to establish?
I think he's going to be philosophically a lot like Jeff Choate in terms of culture. I think he's going to want to have things kind of player driven upwards. And I think that's something Sam Herder says on his little bit, we're going to play for you in a little while. But that's something Jeff Choate instilled here. A lot of player run stuff. The culture permeates through the players. They're the ones that are kind of almost responsible for passing it down to the new guys on campus. So I think culturally, just the way he envisions football being played and knowing what it takes to win championships and just win championships in an environment like Bozeman, Montana, or in the elements. I think he knows a lot about what it takes to win football in November. I think just culturally, I think he fits in pretty well from what I've seen and read. How about you?
When I was listening to him, he talked a lot about his dad being an influence in his life. And his dad was a 9-man football coach in North Dakota. And he said he learned a lot about how to treat people, what relationships are, specifically in the lens of a football coach. And he kind of capped it off. He said, if you're a head coach and relationships aren't your top priority, you're in it for the wrong reasons. And so for me, that I love that. That's all about me. And anybody who's been listening, I'm all about the father figure. And so I think he brings that. I think he values that. And so if he values that, I think the culture is going to be great. And to kind of piggyback on a different little thing about culture, he kept talking about winning national championships. I mean, that is what he said. Like, very first thing, when the very first glimpse we got with the players, he's like, hey, we're about winning a national championship. And when you watched the Leon's presser that Skyline put out, he said, Brent's vision, 3 things: beat the Grizz 365 days a year, win a conference title, and win a national championship. And when I heard those 3 things, I'm on board.
That's it. That's all there needs to be.
Yeah, right.
And you can shuffle the order, but those are the 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I loved how he came out and told the players, we have to be about winning a national, or we have to make winning a national championship be what it's all about. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, we just have to have the mentality that we're not just going to squeak into the playoffs. We're not going to all right, we made it. Good. No, playoffs are a given. How far do we go in them?
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see a guy who brings that national championship pedigree, who's won 3 national championships at this level of football. Like, how rare is that to get a coach with national championship experience on the staff as your head coach at this level?
I love what he said. He goes, yeah, making the quarters, making the semis, that's all about it. That's fine. But we're here to win national championships. Like, we are just salivating. We're like, oh my gosh, we made it to the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
That's chump change to Brent Vigen. He can just nonchalantly just push
chump
that
change to North Dakota State, anything. Yeah. But yes, right? Agreed. Like, Jeff Choate did such a good job of elevating the expectations and standards. We've talked about this in the past. Like, the standard is now to beat the Grizz, not hope we're going to beat the Grizz. Now the next standard is to make a playoff run. That's just that you just take those natural progressions, the next steps.
For sure.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about longevity. This is something that I think is important. I think Jeff Choate made us realize it's important. It makes you think about it. Do you want a guy who's going to be such a rising hot shot in the profession? He comes in here and he's hired. He does a great job. He's out 3-4 years. Or do you want to try and find a guy who can maybe have that sustained success, but who might stick around a lot longer? And of course, the answer is obviously going to be the guy who sticks around a lot longer. But how do you do that? And how do you weigh the differences there? So let's analyze for a second. Do you think Brent Vigen is the kind of guy who's going to stick around, even if, let's say, year 3, year 4, somehow we do win the national championship, we get there? Is he a guy who sticks around?
Looking at his track record, yeah, I think so. And I'm going to couple that with what Leon Costello said, is Brent Vigen wants to be at Montana State. Now, he said that the same thing about Jeff Choate, or I guess Peter Fields was the guy that hired Jeff Choate, but we've heard that before about Choate. However, I mean, the proof is in
every
the pudding.
Coach is going to say that.
Yeah, right. The proof is in the pudding. When you look at his work resume, he's been really only 2 places. And when you listen to him talk about it, he goes, yeah, I've been approached with different things, but it's never been the right fit for me. And he talked about Montana State being the right fit for him and his family. So I have no reason to believe that he's looking to move on. I think he likes FCS football. And another thing, Ryan, if I'm just being honest, in the next 5 years, looking at Montana State, looking at like where we are going just kind of as a whole in the university, I wouldn't be surprised if salary bumps, come along that we're paying more to our coaches. And so to make this a more attractive place. And of course, if we do it, then it's going to happen with the University of Montana. I just see that happening. So I think it's a good time to be. I think he struck gold. So because I think Montana State's going to go. I mean, we're going to talk about this later on, but the possibility of going FBS in the future, I think is a real possibility, and that's going to bring some money. So I think he positioned himself well. And if he's a successful coach, who knows? He might be around for a long time.
Yeah, I think he has a good chance to be a coach who has some longevity. I was listening. I didn't listen to it. I read some quotes from Craig Bull's press conference when they hired Tim Pulisic to fill his position. Just a pretty funny little circumstance there, who was also a candidate at Montana State for the head coaching gig. But he said that, Brent Vigen has had some opportunities to be head coaches in the last few years, and he didn't take them. He turned them down or didn't want to pursue them. He didn't say where. I mean, it could be Division II. You don't know where it would be, but
sure.
I think a guy who has only lived in North Dakota, coached in North Dakota, and coached in Wyoming, he's 45 years old. If he's going to take a job, I think his dream jobs are probably anywhere in that kind of region, right? And there's not a whole lot of jobs if you're going Division I or FCS. There is North Dakota State, North Dakota, South Dakota State, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, and Montana State. That's it, right?
Yeah.
I guess you could probably throw like Idaho State in there because that's probably closer to. I don't know my geography very well. Is Pocatello closer to Laramie than like Bozeman? I don't know. But either way, there's not. If you draw like a circle, there's not a lot of places around there that you'd want to be. And I get the sense that he actually wanted to be here. He got excited when the job was going to potentially come open when Jeff Choate was putting his name in the ring for the Boise State job. I think his ears perked up then. We'll get into this with Sam Herder as well. But I think it's a job he's had an eye on. And once he got wind that it was going to become open, and it officially did become open, I think he was pretty excited to throw his hat in there. So I think he's a guy who wants to be here. I think he's a guy who's comfortable at this level of football. And I don't know if he's a guy who's chasing that Power 5 position coach or head coach gig or anything like that. I think he's a guy who could truly stick around as long as he wants to.
Yeah, well, it's going to be results driven, right? So if he's floundering 2-3 years in, his seat's going to be hot because Montana State's just exploding right now. We don't have time to just wait around for that kind of those kind of results.
All right, so we were going to talk about expectations here. I think this is actually a good time to play the Sam Herder interview. We've been talking about fit culture, all that stuff. We're going to do that again with Sam Herder here, and we'll come out of that. We'll talk a little bit about expectations year one, what we think the expectations might be in year 3, 4, and 5, all this stuff. And we'll give our final thoughts on Vigen before we kind of move on to some other stuff. So this interview was supposed to be you and me. We had some audio issues where Sam Herder could not hear you, Ryan Foley. So basically it's just me doing the interview at this point. But here's a little 15-minute clip with Sam Herder on his thoughts on Brent Vigen. Again, Sam Herder, senior FCS analyst for Hero Sports, NDSU alum, covered NDSU after graduating. So the guy knows plenty about the program and Brent Vigen. So here is my interview with Sam Herder. And now we welcome in Sam Herder of Hero Sports, the senior FCS analyst. We thought we would bring in Sam to talk a little bit about the hiring of Brent Vigen because he is familiar with him from his days at North Dakota State. Sam Herder is a NDSU alum. Am I correct on that, Sam?
Yeah, I graduated from NDSU, and I started covering FCS and NDSU football back in 2011, 2012. So covered the first 3 national championships there when Brent Vigen was there. So pretty familiar with him and what he brings to the table for Montana State.
So you just missed covering when Brent Vigen came to Bozeman in 2010 and stomped the Bobcats.
Yeah, I do remember that. I wasn't covering the team or anything like that, but I do remember that surprise run that NDSU had back that year.
That almost seemed like the game that kind of catapulted North Dakota State into their "You're welcome, Bison fans." We're the springboard, I guess. So one thing that was interesting to me, I was actually listening to your BMAC and Herd FCS podcast, which, guys, if you're listening, check it out. They're the best FCS podcast around. But you were talking a little bit about names that you thought would be good replacements for Jeff Choate. And I believe this was unprompted or without any prior knowledge, but you actually brought up Brent Vigen's. So when the announcement came down that it was actually Brent Vigen, what was your initial impression?
Yeah, I mean, really, I thought it was a home run hire because everything just fits with Brent Vigen and what he brings for Montana State. And, I did cheat a little bit on the podcast. I first heard, when I brought up Dan Jackson, that was, straight up out of the blue. But Brent Vigen, I heard a small amount of whispers when Jeff Choate was being seriously considered for the Boise State job. I just got a text that said, hey, like, this is low key, like, don't know how much is there. It's completely off the record. But if Jeff Choate did get the Boise State job and Montana State was still planning to play in the spring, like, one of their top targets would be Brent Vigen. But that person that told me that said he wasn't sure if there was mutual interest there, that, Brent Vigen was just a name that Montana State was interested in. And so his name was in the back of my mind. I just didn't know if Vigen was going to leave an associate head coach and OC coordinator job at the FBS level to be an FCS head coach. But when I saw his name was actually out there for, as a finalist, I thought, honestly, that he should be their top target. And I understand that, there was maybe some other offers made before Vigen, but, ultimately, I think Montana State got the right guy. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about it already, but, just he understands how the FCS works. Sometimes when you bring in an FBS coordinator, they don't understand that, okay, our recruiting budget's a little smaller and we have less scholarships and our meeting rooms are a little smaller, our locker rooms are a little smaller. Like, this is a little bit different. And Vigen knows, how the FCS level operates. He obviously knows what it takes to win national championships and conference championships at the FCS level. As an associate head coach, he did have somewhat head coaching duties. We know about his pedigree with the quarterbacks that he's worked with and sending them to the NFL. And obviously Montana State quarterback is one position they struggled with under Jeff Choate. And, regionally too, I mean, he knows that region. He's recruited in that region. He can probably even dip into a little bit of North Dakota, and maybe Montana State can start getting some big North Dakota offensive linemen along with Montana offensive linemen. So, I mean, all the way around, it really made sense for me. And I thought that I'm surprised he wasn't, offered the job right away, but ultimately, he's the new guy there.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that you kind of heard whisperings of Vigen when Choate was interested in the Boise State job, because I think Vigen came out in his press conference and basically said, like, he was interested. As soon as he heard Jeff Choate was going to Boise State, it kind of like instantly became on his radar. He kind of had apparently identified as Montana State as kind of a program that he would potentially leave to be a head coach at. And Chris Bull's press conference yesterday, I believe, which would be Wednesday at this point, he had mentioned that maybe Vigen had other head coaching opportunities and had turned them down, so was kind of waiting for the right fit. And I think you just described it well, that Brent Vigen seemed to be a perfect fit for Montana State, so it all kind of came together.
Yeah, and I know when Chris Kleiman left NDSU back in 2018, I want to say, I know the three finalists for that job was Matt Entz, who obviously got the job, and then Brent Vigen, and then Tim Polasek, who coincidentally has replaced Vigen as Wyoming's offensive coordinator. It's kind of funny how things just come full circle. And so when I heard that, the whisper of Vigen, yeah, it is interesting that, his, ears perked up when he found that Jeff Choate was potentially on the move. But, my initial thought was probably, okay, Vigen, he's probably, he probably can replace Craig Bull. Bull probably only has 3, 4, 5 years left. And my thinking was, okay, Vigen, if he was going to come back to the FCS level, maybe the only place that would be is North Dakota State, or else he'll just be patient and be an FBS head coach in a few years. But then I heard a little bit of his press conference, and he was saying that Montana State was, one of the few schools that he would be interested in being a head coach. And, when I heard that, it did make sense, because I've talked about it plenty of times and written about it, that, Montana State has the same things that NDSU has as far as support. Facilities are coming, fan support, administration support. The only show in town, really, along with the rival in the state. And so Montana State is a lot like NDSU in that sense. And so I think it's a good fit for both sides.
So you just mentioned that Vigen was a finalist for the North Dakota State job after Chris Kleiman left for Kansas State. I'm just curious what your personal thoughts would have been if Vigen had been hired by North Dakota State instead of Matt Entz.
Yeah, honestly, when I put out, when Kleiman was officially hired, when I put out my top candidates for the NDSU opening, I actually thought Vigen was probably the prime candidate instead of Entz, because, Vigen is a North Dakota guy, grew up in North Dakota, played at North Dakota State, was a coach at North Dakota State for a long time, and then was an associate head coach at the FBS level for a few years. And I thought that maybe he was probably more ready to be a head coach than Matt Entz. But I think ultimately NDSU went with Matt Entz, which obviously that was just a fine choice, because he went whatever it was 19-0 in his first year. But I think they probably went with Entz more the fact just of familiarity. NDSU, a lot of things have changed at NDSU since 2013 when Vigen left. The administration's not really familiar with Vigen. The players obviously probably didn't even know who he was. And so it probably did make more sense for NDSU to go with Entz just because of the familiarity thing. But I at that time, going back a couple of years, I was thinking that Vigen is probably more ready to be a head coach and lead a program than Matt Entz.
Would you say that Vigen is a player's coach? Is that how you would describe him?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. It'll be interesting to see what his coaching style is. I do feel that he is a player's coach. I saw somewhere, read somewhere that, when he told his quarterback room that he was leaving, that it was pretty emotional, tears with the players and with Coach Vigen. And that shows you how much the players that he has coached and was coaching, how much they respect him and appreciate him. So I think he is a player's coach. It'll be interesting to see what kind of style he has. Craig Bull is more of the CEO type, where he stands in the middle of the field with his arms crossed and kind of just, watches all the drills as they're going on. I know, when Chris Kleiman took over, he was more, into the drills and throwing passes and, kind of working with the linebackers and stuff like that. And so I guess I don't know for sure, but my guess would be Vigen will be more hands-on instead of having that CEO type of just standing in the middle of the field and overseeing everything. I can see him, taking part in quarterback drills and then, jogging over and seeing what the DBs are up to and stuff like that. I think that's the type of style he'll have. Obviously I don't know that for sure, but I do feel like he is a player's coach that, really, because the thing with NDSU too is, you really need player buy-in, and if you have a player-run program, that usually results in national championships. And so I think that's what Vigen is going to bring to Montana State, which the Bobcats probably already had that in some sense, but I think he'll really let the players more or less kind of not run the program, but have a say in a lot of things.
Yeah, I think that's something Jeff Choate definitely instilled here was player-run practices, player-run, like you said, a lot of player-run stuff, culture, and everything like that. So that's good to hear that he kind of believes in that too. And I think that stuff is already in place. I mean, Vigen is really stepping into a pretty good situation at Montana State. The coach wasn't fired. The staff is pretty much intact. The culture has been built up. So I'm just curious, how do you think that Vigen will fit in? I don't know how to phrase this. Jeff Choate is kind of a hard act to follow. I wonder how do you from an outsider's perspective, how do you think that's going to work following just a charismatic guy like Jeff Choate?
Yeah, I think the fans, the players, the media that cover him, it'll probably take some adjustment because he is a little bit more vanilla. He's not eccentric. He's not, a quote machine. He's very level-headed and mellow. And I think, that could be a good thing for Montana State. I always say that players kind of take on the attitude of their head coach, which is why, Youngstown State and Bo Pelini, they could be great one week and then bad the other week just because, we all know what Bo is like. But I think, having, kind of that I don't want to say level-headed because it's not like Jeff Choate was not level-headed, but a more even-keeled guy, calm, that'll take some adjustments. But at the same time, personality-wise, it'll be different. But I do think philosophy-wise, Vigen and Choate are pretty similar. It's interesting that, while Vigen had, so many great quarterbacks under his wing, he still was, as an offensive play caller, a run first guy. And so that obviously is still going to be what Montana State does, is run the football. And then I think he'll add in the fact that he can identify quarterback talents, he can develop them, and kind of have that be the missing piece for the Bobcats.
Kind of leads me into my last question here, and then we'll let you get out of here. Do you think Brent Vigen is capable of taking Montana State over the next hump, getting to maybe a national championship game?
Yeah, I think he is the guy for that, honestly. I mentioned earlier that sometimes if you hire an FBS coordinator, sometimes it's more of an adjustment for the coach than the players themselves. And I think, Vigen, he obviously hasn't been a head coach before, but in my opinion, I think he has head coach written all over him. When I also saw that Tim Polasek, who I'm also familiar with, and I saw that he was, potentially maybe not the final candidates list, but still a candidate. I was kind of thinking, I don't know. Polasek just kind of feels like, he doesn't really feel like a head coach. He doesn't come off as a head coach. He comes off as more of a coordinator. I always felt that Vigen comes off as a head coach and he comes off as a guy that can lead a program. And, like I said, he knows what it takes at the FCS level to get to that point. He's not going to have to, overhaul a lot with, all the players are in place. The scheme, I'm guessing, is not going to change a whole lot. It's still going to be, running the ball. They might run a little bit more under center compared to maybe some shotgun formations that I know Montana State does. But overall, I do think he is the perfect candidate to get Montana State over that hump and to play for a national championship.
Well, we certainly hope so. And Bozeman, that's kind of the expectations now that Choate has built up, and hopefully that's Vigen can take us there. So, Sam, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Why don't you tell our listeners where we can find some of your great work?
Yeah, our website is herosports.com, and then my Twitter account is @SamHerderFCS.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Well, all right. That was our interview with Sam Herder. Appreciate Sam coming on and chatting a little bit about Brent Vigen. What did you think about Sam's unique perspective on Brent Vigen?
Well, I always appreciate when Sam comes on and he has a different lens than you and I have. One thing that I really thought that just kind of stood out to me listening to Sam was you just saw some fears maybe that I've had, like, is Vigen the guy? Like, and Sam's giving him his full endorsement. We straight up asked him would you be okay if he would have been the NDSU coach? And like, Sam's like, yeah. So he, by all means, that just gives me a lot of hope, I guess, going forward.
Yeah, I really think that what Sam said, and I have no reason to not believe anything he said, gives Bobcat fans who may have had any reservations, I think it makes you feel a bit better. A guy who knows the FCS landscape, who's covered the FCS landscape, who's been a part of the fandom at NDSU and covered the program. He's okay with him running the coach. He seemed to give a pretty good endorsement. He called him a player's coach, which I know you and I have wondered if what that would be like. He thinks he's a player's coach. I think that's something that you and I kind of put an emphasis on. So really good interview, and I appreciate Sam for coming on and talking about it. So expectations now. We've talked a bit about Vigen. What do you think is going to happen next fall? Do you think, I mean, that's a real broad question, but
Yeah.
I guess you could say, whatever expectations you had coming into fall under Jeff Choate, are they similar, less, more now with Brent Vigen at the helm?
If I had to say today, I would just say they'd probably be similar. Given what we've talked about, his vision and Choate's vision align essentially on how football is to be played. And Brent Vigen talked about that in his press conference. And so I don't foresee a major departure of how we play football going forward. Now, we might be better in the quarterback, and that would be great. So my expectations of first season are largely the same. I'm really interested to see kind of how he rounds out his staff, and we're going to talk about that a little later, and that might influence a little bit on how I feel about certain things. But I mean, he said this is not a reclamation project. We are built to win right now, so we're going to continue to win, and I think he's going to expect that. Obviously that's what his first words to the boys. We're here to win national championships. And so high expectations. I think we're going to roll.
Now, he said so much in his press conference about, he's like, hey, I realize I'm stepping into a good situation here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not wrong. The roster is very good right now. Munchie Filer did put his name in the portal, which actually does hurt. He hasn't played in a couple years, so I guess we've been playing without him. But it depends on how many other guys transfer and all that. But as of right now, admirably, nobody has entered the transfer portal, which I'm actually pretty impressed with. I don't know if it's going to stay like that, but if it ends up being the case, I think it's a huge testament to the program at Montana State. But anyway, my expectations are largely the same because Calder talked about this, and you and I have talked about this offline. Jeff Choate had a fair amount of deficiencies as a coach, and he masked those in certain ways, but there's certainly so many things that could have been improved upon. Obviously, the biggest number one thing that you and I hammered on every single episode we've ever done this podcast is Jeff Choate's ability to develop quarterbacks. And we got a guy here whose reputation at the top of his resume is probably developing quarterbacks. So any sort of elevated quarterback play, and you kind of maintain the status quo everywhere else. And I think you, at the very least, you have whatever expectations I would have had for next year, which were pretty high to begin with. I think he can. I think he can do the same with the roster intact the way it is anyway. And if the staff stays relatively intact, at this point, I would say yes. I'd say my expectations are probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
Which might be kind of crazy. Might be stupid to say that, but that's what I'm doing. That's my thoughts right this very second as I'm recording the podcast. Probably different in 24 hours.
Oh gosh, I know. And then we're just itching for any kind of spring ball, fall ball. And we're so starved of Montana State football right now. It's hard. It's hard to predict anything really. Yeah. But yeah, I think you and I are aligned on that. We have high expectations. I think he has those same expectations, and he talked about it. We're ready to go.
All right. Well, I mentioned a little bit about the staff there. Unless you want to talk about expectations down the road, I think we might just skip over that. Keep this thing moving. What do you think? Yep,
I'm good with that.
All right. So the very first thing that Brent Vigen has done is he brought on Taylor Housewright to be his offensive coordinator. He is a grad assistant from Wyoming. Is the connection there in 2018? That's how they know each other. He has no experience calling plays. He's 32 years old. He was a offensive analyst at Oregon last year. The year before that, he was an offensive quality control position at Mississippi State. He also assisted with the running backs. Then there's the 2018 year where he's at Wyoming with the offensive grad assistant. Before that, he was at 2 years at Ashland, which is a Division II program, wide receiver coach 1 year, defensive back coach the next. Then he was at Division III Wittenberg, wide receivers coach in 2015. And then his very first coaching gig in 2013 and 14, Miami, Ohio, grad assistant, quarterback coach 1 year, defensive back coach the second year. He was an All-American quarterback at Ashland, so where he coached Division II. So basically, we're talking about a guy who has pretty minimal experience in a lot of ways, zero experience calling plays to replace the guy that Jeff Choate had brought in, Justin Udy, who had actually never even got a chance to call a game at Montana State. I guess real quick, what do you think of this hire?
I think that Taylor Housewright must have had a significant impact on Brent Vigen during that time he was at Wyoming. They must have had a strong connection. There must have been something Vigen saw in him that just captivated him. And it was like, yeah, okay, if I get this position, this is going to be one of those guys I call. And so that's the only thing I can really put together on this because, yeah, I mean, he's been at quite a few places, but his experience as far as just being able to be an OC, I'm not seeing the work there quite yet.
No, I mean, MSU has had inexperienced play callers last few years. I mean, Matt Miller comes to mind, obviously.
You don't say, yeah.
Right, right there. You would hope that a program like ours could. It comes back to the expectations as a fan of what kind of talent we can recruit as a coach, as from the coaching side. You would think you'd be able to get a guy with some more offensive play calling experience, as in some. I mean, I thought Justin Udy was inexperienced, to be honest with you. So then we got this guy who's never done it at all, but that's the only thing I can think of is he must have made a super strong impression on Taylor Housewright. The hire was made pretty darn quick. So I think it's something he must have had in mind. And of course, if you listen to a podcast on Taylor Housewright, how he got into the coaching gig, I don't think you'd be surprised that he would drop everything at the phone call and just drive straight over to Bozeman immediately. Did you listen to that podcast by chance?
No, I didn't.
He took he took a job at managing a bar, like right out of college, because it was good pay, and they were happy to have him because he was a college grad, which is better than most people applying for the job. And he gets a call, and I was listening to it at work, so I didn't catch it all. But he gets a call basically like, "Hey, I got this coaching gig here. You have to be here tonight." And this is like at 10 a.m. Calls his dad. His dad's like, "Hey, if you want to get in the coaching, you got to do this." So he just like gets in the car, packs his stuff up, drives to Ohio from, I don't remember where he was. I wish I knew that, but it's a decent drive. He said it was like a 10-hour drive. Calls his work on the way, quits, goes and be a grad assistant at Miami, Ohio. So I don't think he has any problem dropping what he's doing and coming to be an offensive coordinator. Montana State, probably a nice little pay upgrade for him. So interesting story. A guy clearly has some passion for football. He has a very good memory from listening to that podcast. So in Vigen we trust on this one. I'm not sure how I feel on it, but I'll trust the man. And you wonder how much too is Vigen planning on having his hand in the play calling soup.
Right. One thing Jeff Choate learned as he went along was to trust his coaches, and so I'm interested to see how Brent does in that aspect.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the staff real quick. The rest of the staff, just kind of see. I don't know what we want to talk about this. Do you want to kind of identify guys that you think are absolute keep on staff kind of guys? I don't want to I don't want to talk bad about anybody or anything like that. I think but we can look at the staff and see like, all right, this guy I'd love to keep on the staff.
Yeah. So what I'll do right now, Ryan, I'll just run down who we have on staff right now, and then we'll just go from there. Okay.
Sounds good.
So outside of Brent Vigen and Taylor Housewright as our offensive coordinator and head coach, we still have BJ Robertson. He's our special teams coordinator, high school relations, assistant head coach right now still. And this is all taken from MSUBobcats.com. So if this is not current, then it's their fault. Bobby Daly.
Bill Lamberty.
Bill, come on, Bill. We love you, Bill.
Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, so Bobby Daly had the title as assistant head coach. I think that was probably just to get him a little bit more cash, but he's mainly the linebackers coach. We have Brian Armstrong, offensive line, run game coordinator. Defensive line is Byron Hout. Jimmy Beal, our boy Jimmy Beal, friend of the podcast, recruiting coordinator and running backs. Cornerbacks is Kyle Reisinger. Wide receivers, that's open because recently vacated by Eric Frazier. We have tight ends, Nate Potter, video coordinator Garrett Becker, football operations Cole Moore, and then we have offensive intern Jonathan Amosa and graduate intern Austin Ibarra. And then last but not least, director of football strength and conditioning Sean Heron.
New hire.
Yep, new hire. So, okay, Ryan. So I'm going to pose a question to you. Out of all of those, like, who do you want to keep?
So I think you can obviously identify BJ Robertson as a guy you just have to keep.
Yeah,
because of his Montana connections. He is the Montana recruiting guru. Like you want that guy here because he's done a great job in state building those inroads to all those small communities, every community in Montana. Like he's a guy you keep on the staff. Just figure out a way to keep him there. If that's his only job, don't even coach any football. Just be the Montana recruiting coordinator. I don't know, but he's got to stay on the staff. I think he does a great job. I was super excited when we hired Jimmy Beal because he has such a good reputation as being a recruiting coordinator. He hasn't had a chance to do a lot yet. He's one of two guys on the staff, right, who's been hired and hasn't coached anything yet.
That's a good point. Yeah,
him and Justin Udy sitting there, not having coached anything for MSU. So, what you look down the list, I know you're real high on Byron Hout. I am as well. I think it's a great defensive line coach. I think he's a guy who could rise in the coaching ranks if you can somehow keep him on staff. That'd be a great one. Bobby Daly, I think he does a great job with linebackers and who could actually be a candidate for defensive coordinator, if you ask me. Those are the guys I identify as guys I'd really like to see stick around. I think Nate Potter actually does a really good job with the tight ends too, considering they never catch any football. So basically he's just like a secondary offensive line coach. But I think he does a great job. So how about you? What are you thinking about that group there?
Ryan, you named pretty much every coach we have except Brian Armstrong, and I love Brian Armstrong. I think he does a great job with the offensive line and run game coordinator.
Honestly, there's not a single. I like this. This is a good staff.
Yeah,
and there's not a single guy. I feel bad for Justin Udy. I don't know anything about him. I don't know what kind of coach he is, so it's easy for me to not say he needs to stay on. But I feel bad. He just got kind of a raw deal, and so far he hasn't announced any new position or anything like that. So you wonder, is he going to stay on as a quarterbacks coach? He actually is the offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach. He'd be taking a pretty big pay cut. But at the same time, he's not very experienced. So he might have a hard time finding another job as an offensive coordinator in FCS anyway. So he might behoove him to stay around for a couple of years and then move on or learn from Vigen and the new guy. I don't know. So there's some options there. It's a good staff, man. There's nothing. I wouldn't trade anybody right here. That's the hard part.
I could see Udy taking over Eric Frazier's job with the receivers. Let's say by chance Bobby Daly goes up into the DC role. Is there anybody that you think like, hey man, we could get back to Montana State that would, or bring in a coach that would just really fit that spot right there?
So, yeah, if you're talking about position coaches and Daly does take the DC job and there's a linebacker coach open. So we had an interview with Jody Owens last year. We've done this podcast for a long time. I'm actually starting to blend it all together.
Yeah, it was during quarantine.
So we got Jody Owens on and he was telling us, man, how much he just loved Bozeman and he wants to he'd be happy to be back at some point coaching on the staff. And if the job opened up, he's currently like a co-defensive coordinator at a Division II school, Pittsburgh State. I think he'd be an easy choice to get back as a linebackers coach. I think he'd be a guy I would love to have back there because I think he got kind of a raw deal. The 2015, the end of the Ash era, came in for 1 year and then the whole staff got canned. So that's just something that just jumps to mind based on the conversations we had with him last year. How about you?
Oh yeah, Jody Owens would be a no doubt. Like a no-brainer for me. Bring him back. If nothing else, like he bleeds blue and gold, like you and I. And also he has that Texas connection. I think keeping that Texas connection open is huge. We have to continue to mine out of Texas. And so Jody would be a great fit on the Bobcat staff. And I know he wants to get back here. So yeah, I'm really hoping for him.
I mean, if you even look at a team like North Dakota State, they're not winning all their football games, recruiting guys out of North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, all that. They're that Watson guy that tore us just to pieces last year. He's from Florida. So you got to go to some of those states where the speed is. So a guy like Jody Owens with that pipeline to Texas, I mean, you got to have some southern speed somewhere, right? If you win a national championship.
I remember Jeff Choate talking about it's wise to hire Bobcat legends back onto your staff. And Jody Owens, I mean, to me, I've said this on our podcast, he's like probably my favorite Bobcat of all time.
Yep.
And so him and Travis Lilly. But yeah, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't, at least I don't see why Brent would not even like entertain the idea of bringing Jody Owens back.
Yep.
So I hope Jody reaches out to him and, can at least establish contact.
Other than that, there's no one that just jumps to my mind because I mean that would be the position perfect right there.
Yeah,
if
right?
Daly gets a DC job, there'd be linebackers coach open. So I mean, there you go, easy pickings right there. No one else really comes to mind. I mean, obviously, Kane Ioane, I guess now ex Bobcat.
Well, hold on, before we move on to Kane, what do you think about like maybe bringing back Roger Cooper as DC?
That's right. Yeah, his name's been floated around there, and I have mixed feelings on that. I like Roger Cooper a lot. His defenses at Idaho State have not been very good.
Yeah.
And Idaho State's not very good. So that's just is that a product of just being in a bad situation? I don't know. All right. Idaho State's been bad for a long time. But their defenses have been like historically bad, I feel like, in the last few years.
Yeah.
So maybe he'd be better luck here. Maybe he's a good offensive or defensive coach and he just doesn't have anybody to work with down there. I don't know. But it makes you wonder because like the Bobcats, when Jeff Choate's first year, the talent wasn't bare, but a lot of guys guys left the team when Choate was hired. That's expected. That's fine. I'm not blaming anybody. But basically, we went from like one of the worst defenses I've seen in the history of watching football, the 2015 Bobcat. They were so bad. I'm sorry. And
they were.
Greg Rat came in and whipped that freshman team. There was like 4 freshmen on the defensive line at one point in that game, I'm pretty sure. Derek Marks. And he whipped them into shape, and they were like a top half Big Sky defense in year 1. So it can be done. Like a good coach can take a team that had not been performing or maybe have the guys play above their talent level. So I don't know. I don't know about Roger Cooper. I do love having Bobcat legends back on the staff, but I'm not sure I'd be comfortable having him be the defensive coordinator necessarily. But he has Big Sky defensive coordinator experience. That is a huge positive.
Hey, Thorny, who coached that 2015 defense?
That would be Marshall.
And?
Nope, just Marshall. I know you're baiting me here. I know it. Yes, Kane Ioane was the co-defensive coordinator. And there's a lot of Bobcat fans who were not thrilled to have Kane Ioane back. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Bobcat Nation was not real thrilled about bringing him back after he was an analyst at UW for a while because of 2015. That 1 year alone pretty much spoiled a lot of people's opinion of his coaching abilities.
About that. Yeah, we talked about that on our podcast. Hey, Thorny, before we get into the Golden Coolie questions, let's just wrap this up with this final thought. And that final thought is, did MSU make a mistake letting Kane Ioane go? We have to talk about that in this episode.
On the surface, yes. I don't know any details. I don't know if he wanted the job. I don't know anything, but to let a guy who's like the most bobcat that ever bobcatted go, it's tough. It's a tough one. Tough pill to swallow.
Okay. If you had to put a percent, Kane Ioane versus Brent Vigen, what you know right now, what kind of percentages would you give them in relationship to like having the job, like, or like your favoriteness?
I don't understand how I'm supposed to quantify that.
Like 60-40 Kane, Brent, or what are you thinking? Let me ask you a better question. Would you pick Brent Vigen right now over Kane Ioane?
Stop trying to use your math on me. That was confusing. Now that I've sit there and consumed a bunch of Brent Vigen stuff, I'm all in on Brent Vigen. But if you asked me straight up before I knew anything about Brent Vigen, I would have chosen Kane Ioane easily.
Yeah.
So
it's tough.
probably 50-50 right now, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer to do. I mean, I was trying to put you on the spot and make you, do a 49-51 kind of thing, but it's tough. I mean, you don't have a known quantity with Kane Ioane. Like you said, he's the most Bobcat out there. Well, I mean, he is the golden boy. He's been groomed for this moment in his life, and he passed it up. I don't know if that's by Montana State's fault or Kane Ioane's like just going, you know what? I need to get out of here. Who knows? Like you and I are just fans. Like we don't know. People around probably do know. But
I mean, he might have finally just decided he wanted to spread his wings from Montana State. I mean,
and now
he might not have wanted the job.
Yeah, I think he's he's going to be plugged into Nutri. He's going to be making a lot more money. And let's be honest, Ryan. If money was the reason, money's enough. Because the difference in amount of money he was going to make, I mean, it's enough. If you're saying, yeah, I can make 100,000 more or 200,000 more, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's enough. That could be an easy decision for you.
Yep, it's absolutely true. And best wishes to him. And yeah, if he has a successful stint at Boise State, it's only going to get better for him.
Yeah.
So he's, as far as I'm concerned, he's taking a step off to bigger and better things, and we probably won't see him again. You never know. Like a guy could come back and want to be head coach's alma mater down the road, but assuming things go well for him, I don't think he'll be back anytime soon. And it makes me sad, man. He was a big part of Bobcat lore for a long time, both as a coach and as a player.
Yeah.
Basically, my entire fandom, Kane Ioane, has been there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. And, just best of luck, Kane.
Yeah. I'll most fondly remember him as a player, not as a coach. Thorny, this has been a beefy episode.
We've had longer.
Yeah. Well, I'm not talking about just length. I'm just talking about like the meat of the subject. It's been big.
Not the length, it's the girth. Got to put an explicit tag on this episode.
Yeah, you got to leave that in. All right, buddy. Are you ready to move on, or we can do our golden coolies and get out of here?
I think so. I'm scrolling up and down on our sheet here. I think we covered it, pretty much everything.
Man.
Well, actually, I forgot. We're looking at the time. It's not too bad, but then we haven't put in the Sam Herder interview yet. So yeah. We're pushing an hour 15 right now and haven't got to the questions. So yeah, let's move to the questions. Why don't you take the first one? Why don't you pick one? I think they're all on the document. We had a good number this time. Thanks. I appreciate everyone sending us questions. Some relevant, some are silly. All right, well, let's kick it off with a Bobcat Nation Coolie question. Montana Bob. He asks us which coaches are staying and who is moving on. I think we covered that pretty well. If I had to press your feet to the fire, though, fully, who would you say is moving on? One coach. I'm not going to ask you for the reason why, just who you think might be on their way out, either of their own choice or Brent Vigen's choice.
I hate to admit it because he's my favorite coach on the staff, Byron Hout.
I think he has some opportunities, maybe.
Yeah, I think he just, he was brought on by Choate. He was a Choate disciple. He's a disciple of Chris Pearson. I mean, he's a Boise State player, right? I just think, I don't know. I mean, that's a really tough one. I think he could stay. I could see that for sure. I could see him being maybe the defensive coordinator, but I don't know what's inside of me that's saying like he's just probably going to move on to something that's going to keep him moving up the ranks.
Man, if I had to pick one guy, it's tough, man. It's tough. The staff is good. I like them all, and I guess I'd pick somebody on the offensive side because Brent Vigen is an offensive-minded coach.
Good point.
So, I guess Justin Udy.
Yeah.
I mean, he just lost the OC position, so I don't know if he's going to stick around or not. But if I had to pick a guy most likely to leave, it'd be him, I guess.
Okay, I can see that.
And for staying, I think Brent Vigen says he wanted to make the staff choices final by the end of next week, I'm not sure who gets changed out here. Like, I could not tell you who I think, other than, I mean, obviously Justin Udy is not the offensive coordinator anymore, but if he wants a position, I think he would have been, we have heard he'd be gone by now if he was going to go, or I've heard he'd be on the way out. So I don't know who's going to leave. I don't know. Probably, or we're talking about, what are we talking about now? Good Lord. Talked into circles and I confused myself.
Who's staying? Who's leaving?
Everyone's staying until they're made not to. I don't think anyone's leaving on their own volition except for maybe Byron Hout.
Yeah.
Wow. Could have answered that a lot quicker.
Okay, moving on. Spring Creek Cat.
I might be
our
on beer
boy
number
down
2
in
at this
Lewistown. Man, Spring Creek. Your name always gets me. It's alliteration. I always have trouble with
Spring
that.
Creek
I'm a
Cat.
math teacher. There it is. What is the most important hire, OC or DC?
I'm going to say defensive coordinator because Vigen is an offensive coordinator by trade. So he's going to have a lot better influence and handle on that. I think he's going to have to hire someone and let them do their thing. So I think defensive coordinator is more important hire.
I believe that 100%. I have nothing to add to that, but I think that's a great question.
It's a great question. All right.
All right. Moving on, Blue and Gold Blitz. What is the best burger you've ever eaten in Montana? He has 2 questions. That's the first of 2 questions. I did prepare for this, Blue and Gold Blitz. Being a Great Falls native myself, they have an awesome Roadhouse Diner burger joint down there on, I think it's 15th or 14th, 15th. Death by Bacon, a single patty stacked with 4 slices of bacon, braised, grilled onions, provolone cheese, and topped with our scratch-made bacon jam. Thorny, if you've never had bacon jam, stop what you're doing. Invest in bacon jam. It's the best topping ever.
Are we going to charge this business for that ad you just read for them? It sounds like you're reading their menu.
I was reading their menu, man. I was exactly. That's what I was doing.
Well, that's a great answer. I thought long and hard about this. I don't have an answer.
Yeah,
and it's not because there's so many to choose from. It's been so long since I've had a burger in Montana that even this like registers. Like I haven't lived in Montana at this point for 10 years. Jeez, that's sad.
I think the correct answer to this question is something we don't know. I think it's got to be like one of those mom and dad bars in like small town Montana, and they just bring out the biggest burger and it's the best beef because it's just it was raised right there in the lot behind them, and we just don't know that place. I don't know that place, but the Roadhouse Diner is definitely delicious. So
I thought of an answer, and it's not necessarily because the burger is so good. It's just the childhood memory attached to it. When we went and had like bison burgers at like the Custer's Last Stand reenactment. I would say I was
hoping to God you weren't going to say Fuddruckers.
Hey, Fuddruckers did make a pretty good burger. All right.
They do.
Although the one in Missoula completely closed and got demolished. But anyway, yeah. Custer's Last Stand, bison burger, back in like early 90s before bison meat really became readily available like it is now. A lot of memories attached to that. So sure. The burgers at the stand in, is that Hardin? Is that where the Custer's Last Stand reenactment is?
Don't know.
Oh, man. It's been a long time. So anyway, that burger.
All right. I'm going to hold off on Blue and Gold's his second question. I'm going to read that last. And so we're going to go down to our Twitter or email website. We got one from the email? Or was
we
it
did,
the website?
Yeah. Someone submitted one through the email.
Nice.
Our Coolie submission form.
Carter Meyer asked, does Coach Vigen eat beef? He looks like a guy who eats beef to me.
He's from Bucks, North Dakota. I'm pretty sure that's all he eats.
I'm sure he's got this question before. I'm going to say he eats beef.
Yeah, I get why. Vegan, the jokes are endless. Carter. But pretty sure he's going to be, hope he's feasting on Grizz meat. So
yeah,
I say, yeah, of course he eats meat.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Boston Bobcat says, my question is, what happens to Coach Udy going forward?
I mean, yeah, we
talked about this.
Yeah, we covered it. We don't know. I mean, it's a good question. We don't have any more information than anybody any Joe Schmo on Bobcat Nation, unfortunately. But hope he stays on. But it is what it is at this point. I think he might
deserves a chance.
I think he deserves a chance, and I think he might actually take a position coach job if offered.
Yep, that's what I'm hoping. Our friend Brian Marceau says, what are the most promising and concerning aspects to this hire? Brian, you're going to have to go back to hour 1 to listen to that.
We can make it succinct. I think promising is that his pedigree at FCS championship power North Dakota State, and the concerning aspect is his abilities calling plays at Wyoming. I'll make it real quick.
Yep, there you go.
You agree with that?
100%. 100%.
Thanks for listening, Brian.
Yeah. If you made it this long, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, congratulations. I don't know why you're still listening.
Yep. Montana Parlay, another friend of ours. How soon before it starts, before Bear Tycoon starts his social media push for Vigen to be hired by FBS school? As soon as the Bobcats beat the Grizzlies again, which is probably going to happen next fall.
That's absolutely correct answer. He doesn't care until the Grizz lose again, and then it's the entire offseason is Bear Tycoon tweeting out, hire Brent Vigen to any single coaching opportunity across the country.
Yeah.
So yes, and it will happen.
Yep. Like seared into my memory. If Derek Marks is out there listening, thank you, Derek Marks, because I remember you at the very end of Cat Grizz 2018, after the goal line stand, you're on the airwaves there, and you said it's now the standard, and I'll never forget you saying that, and you made me believe it, and it was proven true, and it is the standard now. So as soon as that happens again, Bear Tycoon will be lobbying for Vigen to be at the FBS. So if you don't know what we're talking about, our friend Bear Tycoon, who is basically the Montana Mint producer or CEO, I don't know what he does. Anyways,
he's the talent.
Yeah, he's the talent. He's
just ask him.
He's really just a lawyer out in the East Coast. Anyways, anytime there's an FBS opening, he would put Jeff Choate's resume or lobby that position on Twitter or social medias for Jeff Choate to be hired away. So,
do you think Bear Tycoon's just sitting there thinking like, yes, this is all my doing?
No, he's not.
I got Jeff Choate that job.
Yeah, Bear Tycoon is also a Great Falls native, so he went to Great Falls High. So I do give him some love on that. But yeah,
real quick here,
comical.
Your comments about Derek Marks. We should totally, before next Cat Grizz, do like a top 5 performances in Cat Grizz history.
Ooh, I like that.
That'd be a really fun episode, a really fun segment. Individual performances in Cat Grizz games only. Write that down on your. I know you have a pen and paper next to you because you're a pen and paper guy.
Top 5.
Write it down.
5. Got it. I'm on it.
Okay. Then we have a question on Twitter from Kevin Inabnit. I have no idea how to say that, buddy. I'm sorry. And this is a question that could be an entire podcast episode, isn't it? Fully. He asks us, how will Brent Vigen use Troy Anderson? Oh, you know what? We've been talking for a long time. I don't have the energy for this. He's going to use him the best way he knows how.
That's such a lame answer. That's such a lame answer. You know what's so funny is like Troy Anderson hasn't played football for the Cats in so long. It's almost like he's just like a myth right now. Like he's still on the team and he's still going to play, but he hasn't played in so long given his injury and given COVID status. It's just like, man, I can't believe we're going to get to watch him to play football again. Like I'm excited about that. I think he's going to be used on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm 100% not sure. I mean, now you got me. Now I'm guessing my own stuff. Like Vigen is the offensive guy. I mean, why not hand the ball off to Troy Anderson? Like, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, he might just continue to use him like a little bit of O, a little bit of D.
Yeah,
I would like to think that he sticks on the defensive side of the ball solely. But it's hard to ignore Troy's prowess on the offensive side of the ball. As Coulter tells you, one of the NFL scouts he sat by in one of the games said he's the best touchdown maker I've ever seen. Like, how do you ignore that? How do you just like, oh, well, he's linebacker now. Yeah, I don't know how Brent Vigen's going to use him. I know I have thoughts on how I would use him, but Brent Vigen, I really have no clue. I don't know enough about Brent Vigen. If he was a completely defensive-minded coach, he'd be like easy peasy defense. But he is an offensive coordinator, and he's going to look at what Troy's done on offense. He has plenty of film and tape on it. It's going to be hard to not squeeze him into offense somehow, I bet.
Maybe they'll use him like Montana State should have used him as a running back.
Whole other episode fully.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Troy Anderson.
I would be okay if Troy was a full-time running back, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can withstand it, but all right.
Well, we got one more. We do have one more for Blue and Gold Blitz.
Oh yes.
Blue and Gold Blitz. Who would win in a fight between two Brent Vigens and one Jet Choate, and why would Choate dominate the fight?
Man,
we know how Blue and Gold feels.
I'm not sure he's wrong.
It's that we talked about this last night. It's kind of like who would win in a fight between Choate and a Hurricane, and the Hurricane. I can't say it anymore. Hurricane's name is Choate. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know. The Choate lore is going to live on. I don't know how to answer that question.
I will say Brent Vigen is bigger than you think he is. He's a big boy. Somebody on Bobcat Nation posted the video from like SWX or something and talking about, like, I didn't realize how big Vigen is. Go to this segment of the video, and he's standing next to Cole Moore, and Cole Moore is 6'2", and Vigen is bigger than he is. So Vigen's at least 6'3" or 6'4".
Well, he played tight end, so he must be a big boy.
Yeah, so I mean, there you go. That's a pro for two Vigens against Jeff Choate. Ooh, that's a fair fight.
How big was Choate?
I don't know.
I really don't know. Did Choate play?
I think Choate's not as big as you think he is.
Well, his ego precedes him, so yes. Okay. All right. So, Thorny, we decided on two winners tonight. Do you remember who they are? Because I can't.
Spring Creek Cat for the serious question, and we liked the two Vigens versus Choate question, so we gave Blue Gold Blitz also a coolie.
All right. Woo!
First two-time winner, Spring Creek Cat, and first two-time winner in a single episode. Congratulations. All right.
Send us your contact info, and I'll get that Golden Coolie to you. We are done. Thorny, take us out, buddy.
This has been an episode, all right? This is...
Oh, my gosh.
I'm looking at the timer, hour and 24. Yeah, I feel like we got a little loopy at the end, so let's get out of here. You can always find us on Twitter, RRCatcast. You can find us on rrcatcast.com. You can find us on the bobcatnation.com, the message board for Bobcat fans, because we have a recurring thread there where I post all the episodes and some chatter. Foley's kind of in charge of the Golden Coolie thread, which is where we got these questions from. Thanks, everyone, for sending in your Golden Coolie questions. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate it. It's been such a fun ride, and I just want to appreciate everyone. Say thank you for everyone for listening to our show. Thank you again to Jeremiah Johnson for sponsoring us, and let's get out of here with a Brent Vigen, Go Cats.
Go Cats.
Go Cats.
All right. I got places to be.